Please welcome Gregory Pardlo.
Thanks, Nickole. That's fantastic. I know. Wow. Double Dutch. The girls turning double Dutch bob and weave like boxers pulling punches, shadowing each other, sparring across the slack cord, casting parabolas in the air. They whip quick as an infant's pulse, and the jumper, before she enters the winking, nods in time as if she has a notion to share, waiting her chance to speak. But she's anticipating the upbeat, like a band leader counting off the tune they are about to swing into. The jumper stair-steps into mid-air as if she's jumping rope in low gravity, training for a lunar mission. Airborne a moment long enough to fit a second thought in, she looks caught in the mouth bones of a fish as she flutter floats into motion like a figure in a stack of time-lapse photos thumbed alive. Once inside, the bells tied to her shoestrings rouse the gods who've lain in the dust since the Dutch acquired Manhattan. How she dances patterns like a dust-heavy bee, retracing its travels in scale before the hive. How the whole stunning contraption of girl and rope slaps and scoops like a paddle boat. Her misted skin arranges the light with each adjustment and flex, now heather-hued, now sheen, light listing on the fulcrum of a wrist, and the bare, jutted joints of elbow and knee, and the faceted surfaces of muscle, surfaces fracturing and reforming like a sun-tickled sleeve of running water. She makes jewelry of herself and garlands the ground with shadows. Thank you. Thanks. My glasses broke this morning, and Aracelis helped me fix it. She took the spring from one of these pens, but in the process, she pricked her finger, and then JV came in. I asked him to help me, and he pricked his finger. So now I'm positive the glasses are cursed. They're going to get me back. What's that? Maybe the spring is cursed. It's out to get me, I'm sure. And I have to apologize. I'm sure you notice I'm a little jumpy. I stopped at Starbucks to get an iced chai latte, and the guy said, "Oh, I have another one, the hot one, that was a mistake. Do you want it?" I could easily have said no. Written by himself. I was born in minutes in a roadside kitchen, a skillet whispering my name. I was born to rainwater and lie. I was born across the river where I was borrowed with clothespins, a harrow tooth, broadsides sewn in my shoes. I returned, though it please you, through no fault of my own, pockets filled with coffee grounds and eggshells. I was born still and superstitious. I bore an unexpected burden. I gave birth, I gave blessing, I gave rise to suspicion. I was born abandoned outdoors in the heat-shaped air drifting like spirits in old windows. I was born a fraction and a cipher and a ledger entry. I was an index of first lines when I was born. I was born waist-deep, stubborn in the water, crying, "Ain't I a woman and a brother?" I was born to this hall of mirrors, this horror story. I was born with a prologue of references, pursued by mosquitoes and thieves. I was born passing off the problem of the 20th century. I was born. I read minds before I could read fishes and loaves. I walked a piece of the way alone before I was born. I mentioned in workshop the forms and the conventions. There are conventions to everything, and everything has a form. And I found myself trying to write poems in the forms of in unlikely forms. One of which was the course description. And talking about unlocking, what was the verb you used? Unhushing the conversations. I found I really wanted to teach a course on stereotypes, and I didn't quite know how to couch it. So, shades of green, envy and enmity in the American cultural imaginary. Images of the stud and the buck have an amorously crafted resonance burnished by cultural anxieties and addicts' logic toward the habit they place in the mind and the mysteries we lay at their feet. This course will begin by focusing on models represented in the 1994 Charles Russell film, The Mask, and Ang Lee's 2003, The Hulk, the mojo and the genetic regression, the hypersexuality and the rage. These qualities are thrust and airbrushed onto the Bacchic body of the other as we fantasize our repression of them in ourselves, the unquiet threat of psychosomatic greening, a silk garret, an onanistic envy of the other's capacity for release, a monumental iconography of the hermetical black box of the brain. While we might be tempted to reduce these types to the dichotomy of comedy and tragedy, this course will examine the ways in which there is but one mask, a Janus-faced cleavage of thou art and thus am I, our goat-sung desires adrift in the wilderness, our telltale passions pulsing beneath the tulips and gladiolas in a mildewed hat box, the act of masking, triumphal and deadly, trembling the bulb on its stem. Another form was the rare book description. So I met this guy who writes rare book descriptions in the catalog, and I thought that's obviously a great challenge to write a poem in that form. But I needed a book, so I had to invent a book. It would be something a little out of date, something with some sentimental value. You wanted to hold on to it, but not terribly useful anymore. So I thought of my parents. "837, Wilson, Shirley Ann Mfumi, Black Pampers, Raising Consciousness in the Post-Nationalist Home. Black Talk Press, Lawnside, New Jersey, 1976, 442 pages, illustrator unknown, 10.5 by 11 7/8 inches. Want tips for nursery decor? Masks and hieroglyphics. Aquaba dolls. Send Raggedy Ann to the trash heap. This tome is a how-to for upwardly mobile black parents beset with the guilt of assimilation. Stop! Revealed here are the safety pinnings of the nascent black middle class, their leafy split-level cribs and infants with Sherman Hemsley hairlines. Of interest are bedtime polemics on the racist derivations of the wheels on the bus. Chapter headings address important questions of the day. How and how soon should you intervene if you suspect your child lacks rhythm? At what age should you begin initiating your little one to the historical memory of slavery? And how ethical is the two-cake solution? One party for classmates, and a second so you can invite the cousins. I'll explain it later if you don't get that one. Indispensable to collectors for whom Aesop's African origin is no matter of debate will be the gloss and annotation comprising the bulk of the text of the lyrics to Stevie Wonder's Black Man. According to the jacket copy, one of the alternate titles considered was What to Expect When You're No Longer Expecting Revolution. Usual, occasional scattered light foxing to interiors, contemporary tree calf exceptional, about fine condition, $75. Thanks. I'll read a few, skipping through the series, Marginalia. This is a series kind of interested in the small d, the quotidian domestic aggression, and I'm reluctant to use the word violence, but the kind of aggression that's baked into a family culture that gets normalized over time. I finally friended my brother. It may be we will never speak again. Why speak when we have this crystal ball through which to judge one another's lives? I imagine this is what the afterlife will be like. I'm ghost, we say, instead of goodbye. The Fulton Street Food Town is playing Motown, and I'm surprised at how quickly my daughter picks up the tune. And soon the two of us, plowing rows of goods steeped in fructose under light thick as corn oil, are singing, Baby, I Need Your Lovin', unconscious of the lyrics' foreboding. My happy child riding high in the shopping cart, as if she's cruising the polished aisles on a tractor laden with imperishable foodstuffs. Her cornball father enthusiastically prompting with spins and flourishes and the double-barrel fingers of the gunslinger's pose. But we hear it as we round the rice and Goya aisle, that other music, the familiar exchange of anger, the war drums of parent and child. The boy wants, what? To be carried? To eat the snacks right from his mother's basket? What does it matter? He's making a scene. With no self-interest beyond the pleasure of replacing wonder with wonder, my daughter asks me to name the boy's offense. I offer to buy her ice cream. How can I admit recognizing the portrait of fear the mother's face performs? The inherited terror of nonconformity, frosted with the fear of being thought disrespected by or lacking the will to discipline one's child. How can I account for both the cultural and the intercultural? The boy's cries rising like hosannas as the mother's purse falls from her shoulder, her missed step from the ledge of one of her stilted heels, passion loosed with each displaced hairpin, his little jacket bunched at the collar where she's worked the marionette. Later, when I'm placing groceries on the conveyor belt and it is clear I have forgotten the ice cream, my daughter tries her hand at this new algorithm of love. Each word punctuated by her little fist. Boy, she commands, didn't I tell you? At 13, I asked my father for a tattoo. Might as well have asked for a bar mitzvah. He said I had no right to alter the body he gave me. Aping what little of Marx I'd learned from the sisters down the street who wore torn black stockings with Doc Martens, I said I was a man because I could claim my body and the value of its labor. This meant I could adorn it or dispose of it as I chose. Tattoos, my father said, are like children. Have one, you'll want another. I knew there was a connection between the decorated body and reproduction. This was why I wanted a tattoo. Yet I reasoned, not in so many words. His analogy only held in the case of possession. In other words, I possess my body, but cannot possess my children. His laughter was my first lesson in the human Ponzi scheme of paternalism, the self-electing indenture to the promise of material inheritance, men claiming a hollow authority because simply their fathers had claimed a hollow authority. Knowing I had little idea as to what my proposed tattoo might resemble, my father sent me to my room to sketch it, using the pastels he'd given me for Christmas. Based on his critique, he said he would consider my request. But he'd already taken a shine from my swagger. How can I beautify what I do not possess and call it anything but graffiti? And Chris Rock says my first job is to keep my daughter off the pole. Whether or not I agree with him, I get his point. As a father myself, I now see every mutinous claim of independence as the first steps toward my sweet peas falling in with a bad crowd. Richard Pryor says we're bound to fuck up our kids one way or another. My father would split the difference. I made you, he'd say. I can unmake you and make another one just like you. Wishing well. Outside the Met, the man walks up, sun tweaking the brim sticker on his baseball cap, and he says, "Pardon me, old school," he says. "You know, is this a wishing well?" "Yes, son," I say sideways over my shrug. "Throw your bread on the water." I tighten my chest, wheezy as Rockaway beach sand, with a pull of faux smoke from my e-cig to cozy the truculence I hotbox alone, and I am at the museum because it is not a bar. Because he appears not to have changed them in days, I eye the heel-chewed hems of his pants and think probably he will ask me for 50 cents any minute now. Wait for it. A smoke or something. Central Park displays the frisking transparency of autumn. Tracing paper sky, leaves like eraser crumbs gum the pavement. As if deciphering celestial script, I squint and purse off toward the roof line of the museum, aloof, as he fists 2 pennies from his pockets, mumbling, and then aloud, "My man," he says, "Hey, my man, I'm going to make a wish for you, too." I'm laughing now. "So what, you want me to sign a waiver?" He laughs along. "Ain't say all that," he says, "but you do have to hold my hand. And close your eyes." I make a starless night of my face before he asks, "Are you ready?" "Yeah, dog, I'm ready." Sure, let's do this." His rough hand in mine inflates like a blood pressure cuff, and I squeeze back, as if we are about to step together from the sill of all resentment and timeless toward the dream source of unneeding. The two of us hurtle, sharing the cosmic breast of plenitude, when I hear the coins blink against the surface and I cough up daylight like I've just been dragged ashore. "See now, you'll never walk alone," he jokes, and is about to hand me back to the day he found me in like I was a rubber duck. And he says, "You got to let go." But I feel bottomless, and I know he means well, though I don't believe, and I feel myself shaking my head no, when he means let go his hand. Thanks. A couple of newer ones to wrap up. This is titled Supernatural Bread. I have no idea why I titled it Supernatural Bread. Lexington Avenue tugged the bus to East Hampton. Let me start over. Supernatural Bread. Lexington Avenue tugged the bus to East Hampton out of reach each time I neared it, having missed its stop at 77th, and chased it to the next one, which I hoped would be 69th at first, but had to bet on 66th when traffic cleared and I saw its brake lights squint, get swamped again by traffic, almost evanesced. But I kept running, as if some prior self that I despised was on my heels, nostalgic for my undoing. But it wouldn't, the bus, that is, in fact, stop until it reached the curb at 59th, after I slalomed bodies under that Hunter College jet bridge and past the loading bay of the Park Avenue Armory where men rigged what looked like giant cages. I almost stopped to ask, in a mist that sheened my rucksack plus the duffel I had packed because there's no night bus back to Manhattan, and I'd planned to stay the night out there, where it was more like New England than New York. But then, I guess New York is technically New England, if I'm honest. I mean, especially East Hampton, where I got a room in an 18th century farmhouse, restored punctiliously by this owner guy who thanked his stars, he said, for fabled ramparts fending off migration. And the farm, he said, with some restrained self-adulation, may once have harbored runaways, from before the Civil War. And I thought to ask him why he'd tuck such lore behind that shibboleth of history, the war, but thought again like maybe it was impolite or petty. So I harbored in my head the weary travelers chasing liberation, which by nature has to lurch just out of reach each time it gets precipitously close to revealing itself as the mere abstraction that it is. But this reduced these people's lives to mere projections of my own, just as if I'd caught the coach that moseyed down Lex, as if it were the very pachyderm of time itself. It nonetheless would have left a bus-shaped yearning shrieking through my mental like Williams's Figure 5, compelled through rain and lights to leave a vacant perforation that reflects the way I wish I could be loved, that is, with alacrity and, dare I say, a little desperation. Metaphor. It means to transfer or carry, as a man might carry his namesake in his arms or on his shoulders, cheering, "We bad, we bad," as my father did when he saw himself in me. As I came of age, however, I thought my father was, in the sense that means to hamper or impede, an embarrassment, which is, as all language essentially is, a metaphor. I.A. Richards says a metaphor consists of a tenor and a vehicle. My father would point out that he's using a metaphor to define metaphors. A literalization, like when Richards himself asks if a wooden leg is a metaphor for a wooden leg. My dad, Gregory Pardlo Sr., before he died, lost his leg to diabetes. Even though he himself would be the only person to see it, he insisted that the prosthesis match his skin tone. This is the same guy who gave me a Hot Wheels car for Christmas. The joke, see. He promised me a car when I turned 16. It shimmers on my desk now, a kitschy muse with shark's teeth decals behind the wheel wells. Before he died, I told him I would have preferred a Matchbox car packaged in an actual matchbox, literalizing the figurative commingling of tenor and vehicle, more metonym than metaphor, a pedigree, in other words. He told me to get the stick out of my ass. Greg Pardlo is dead. Long live Greg Pardlo. And I'll end with this one. Convertible. My pop let me steer when I was small enough to snug between his belly and the wheel. Any random intersection, he might hoist me across the handbrake onto his lap to pilot the wagon before returning me to earth. As I got older, he'd only let me steer while he lit a smoke or shed his jacket. I knew I'd never prove to him that I could boss the road alone. At least, that is, I couldn't while he lived. His ashes arrived in a cardboard carton with shipping labels and barcode, heavy enough to trigger the seatbelt alarm as we clipped home, honeysuckle in the air, from the post office. A reasonable person would have put the box on the floor. But you know already, don't you? I held him in my lap. You're mine, I told the box of dad dust, lifting my hands occasionally, reckless to the wind, tempting the evening, swinging our private chariot of steel and bone. Thank you. Yes.